It's very nice to see all of you and each of you, and it's also very nice to see all of you who are looking at me through the camera. I don't know who you are, but you know who I am, I guess, unfortunately. In any case, let's get our work started for this year. More or less, Pesach is Pesach. But let us recall a few details which, over the long haul, really must influence the way in which we approach Pesach. Rabbi Zatzal used to say that the true essence of the Masorah, our tradition, is to know over which laws we go crazy and over which laws we don't go so crazy. So he said, as for instance, he says, when it comes to the issues of deciding whether to tie a left shoe first or a right shoe first, it is indeed mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, and nothing is nothing, but we don't get crazy about it. He says, on the other hand, Chametz on Pesach, Jews are a little crazy. The minhag is to be very, very careful, because it is after all an area of halacha which is very close to our genesis, and therefore takes on the qualities almost of an existential mitzvah, that rather than being a simple halacha. However, given that it is the minhag to go crazy, even within crazy there is room for gradation, and I think it's important to note that much of the halacha that we have, and I'm not talking about everything on the internet, but the halacha that we have in the sources, and the great penchant for doing Pesach till the nth, was written by and for people who lived in one room, who had 2 chairs, 1 table, maybe a small cabinet, a small set of dishes, often a dirt floor. They were people who lived materially very simple lives, as opposed to our culture, in which the collection of stuff and the acquisition of spaces in which stuff lives has really snowballed, so that when people say casually, you should shake out all of your books, did they know that there are people who have 9,000 of them? When they said, you must go to every crack in every room, did they know that there were people who had 16 or 18 of them, and sometimes 2 and 3 houses and different properties? And so, as much as I want you to take Pesach extremely seriously, what I'd like to do is take the level of craziness that was created for people with 2 rooms and at least spread it evenly over your 8 or your 10. Which means not that I want Pesach to be made easy. Not advocating a latchkey Pesach, because I assume most of you're here because to one extent or another you're going to be making Pesach. You're not simply going to close the house. You may be making Pesach somewhere else, and you have to do what you do there. You may have people coming to stay in your home for Pesach, but you're obviously going to be making serious Pesach. But serious also should be not, God forbid, rational, but a level of irrationality to fulfill the Masorah, but to fulfill it in a way that does not become injurious. All right, so we're going to move in our usual fashion. We're going to move through the kitchen and around. We're going to talk about some hot spots in the rest of the house, and also notice some not hot spots in the rest of the house. And then talk about a few of the product issues of some of the perennials and some of the annuals, some of the ones that have just popped up recently or have been resolved recently, and then of course, doubtless there will be some questions. Okay, so let's begin by moving around the kitchen. Now, the kitchen is a particularly sensitive place for very obvious, but for halachic reasons. Why? Because you have in the kitchen the two great agents of chametz movement. You have heat and you have liquid. And heat and liquid move chametz even from, they cause them to leave places where it has been absorbed, and allow it to enter places where it can be absorbed. Right? So this kind of, halachic traffic in microscopic particles is something that we have to monitor very carefully. It's sort of like a halachic version of CSI, where people with gadgets and microscopes are aware of all sorts of connections and contact that normal people wouldn't be aware of. So let's move through the kitchen, and let's first define several concepts, as we do every year, just for the sake of review. The concepts by which things which have absorbed chametz can be talked into surrendering their chametz so that they can be used during the course of the holiday. Now, there are a number of different ways in which this can take place. Number one, there is the granddaddy of them all, which we would call libun gomor. Libun means essentially incineration. Libun gomor is complete incineration. That means when you put something into an oven, for example, that is going to reach a temperature of somewhere between 850 and 950 degrees, you may assume that it ceases to exist because it has been incinerated. Right? Now there is a level one down from that, which is called libun kal, which is, kal is a nice word because now that all of us have experienced, through beer commercials, we put the word L-I-T-E on everything. So now we know, if you know what Miller Lite is, then you know what libun light is. Libun kal. Libun kal is defined by something which is not a complete incineration. It is a high level of heat, generally somewhere toward the neighborhood of 550, which is measured by the fact that the surface is hot enough that if you take a very tiny piece of paper and push and touch it, it will begin to singe. Right? Now, libun kal is one level down from libun gomor. Libun kal is roughly the equivalent of what we're going to talk about in a moment, purging hagola. And the difference between the granddaddy and the light is that, like, as you will see when we start purging things in liquid, it is preferable to precede it with a 24-hour period of waiting. Now, why do we wait this? What is this 24-hour period? Which is to ensure that nothing is called a ben yomo, literally a son of its day, because absorbed flavors deteriorate while they are absorbed. This does not apply to like whole hunks of things, like real chametz, because they are said not to deteriorate so much. However, as one who has had a steady diet of Shabbos leftovers since my children left the house, going right up to Thursday night, I can tell you that Eino Ben Yomo, in my opinion, is a concept which is absolutely true because it just doesn't taste like it tasted on Shabbos. However, it does not deteriorate to the point where you don't have to worry about it being considered food. Because by some definitions, it's food. It's food if you can get your husband to eat it. That's how. Now, whether you could get a dog to eat it, we haven't tried that, but if it works on the husband, you can get him to eat it 4 days after Shabbos, then it's an achievement of the will. In any case, for halachic purposes, I digress. For halachic purposes, when something is absorbed, after the first 24 hours, it is no longer, even if it comes out, it is no longer considered to be a good flavoring. right? So we always allow, except in libun, except in the granddaddy incineration, where it doesn't matter because everything's going to be burned up. In every one of the other areas where we're really talking about getting things to leave, right, pulling things out, we always prefer to do that after they have degenerated a little bit. So we allow the 24 hours so that if there is anything in there, and if it comes out, it is degenerate, so to speak. It is no longer considered to be a good taste. Because if you had that, you'd have to worry about, like, what does it do after it comes out? So we're not going to worry about that. So therefore, for methods of koshering other than libun, for libun kal and for hagola, which is purging, for those methods we're always going to try to have a 24-hour fallow period where something at least is not used around wet heat. Okay. So, let us, now that you are armed with some of these concepts, one more little detail. The detail is, you got us into this, you get us out of this. That is the principle of kibolo kach polto, that the way in which the chometz was absorbed, first of all, is generally the method which is going to bring the chometz back out again. Okay? That is why, for certain things, if you use them dry with heat, that's why we go pretty much to libun gomur. We go to granddaddy libun. Now, libun, classically, what people associated libun with was a blowtorch. Right? The blowtorch is an implement which is extremely attractive to the kind of guys who join the NRA.
Excuse me, I take great offense.
It is a scary thing. And since the invention of I have seen honchos, I know no insult intended, Sandy, but I have seen guys who go, they get the blowtorches. Honey, is that one of the, can I kosher this for you? And it's like their third kid, They just get so excited with it. Oh, I can kosher anything. Oh, great. And they start aiming it at apple muffins and things like that, and they're just going to kosher the heck out of that sucker. So blowtorches are not really practically, unless you really know what you're doing, it's not the way we go about even libun gomor, and frankly, the ubiquity of self-cleaning ovens has basically put the blowtorchers out of business. Except in industrial koshering, which, they send in these scary guys with, who are still dressed in asbestos, even though we've learned that it's dangerous. Anyway, for our purposes, if we have anything that requires libun gomor, we're going to aim toward the self-cleaning oven, which definitely does it. Now, if you don't have a self-cleaning oven, number one, get a new landlord. Number two, get a new oven. Okay, we'll talk about how to get by without it. Okay, so let's begin to move through the kitchen. We can, of course, let's start with the oven. Right? Now, let's begin with Hadassah, because she has an oven which is not self-cleaning, correct?
It is self-cleaning.
Oh, it is self-cleaning. Oh, is there anyone who has an oven which is not self-cleaning? I don't mean to embarrass you. I should really get somebody and pan the room with the camera, see? Make all the people famous. So let's begin with the one that is not self-cleaning, because it's a little trickier. Non-self-cleaning.
What year did self-cleaning start?
What year did it start? For rich people or normal people?
The best oven made, and it's 1951.
Is it self-cleaning?
No idea.
Probably not. If you don't know, it isn't.
No, that's not.
1951, it probably isn't. It would have a self-cleaning cycle.
I like that.
Okay. Let's go to a regular oven. So we'll assume that Jessica's excellent but rather ancient oven. The best of it is a 71 Cadillac, 51 Cadillac. That kind of oven, first of all, the cleaning of it is key, and this is one of my most vivid memories of childhood. That one cleans the interior of ovens and the racks with some kind of a caustic cleanser like Easy Off. Oh, the Easy Off. That to me is the first smell of Pesach, unfortunately, is not a great one, is what I remember is the Easy Off. And so the surfaces should be cleaned with that. Now keep in mind, certain kinds of ovens, the fancy ones like continuous cleaning ovens, you cannot clean them with the real straight up Easy Off. You have to make sure that for those there's a special cleaner that's made for them. But let us assume you're going to clean it very carefully and make sure that there's no actual crusty kind of chametz there. If you scrubbed it, and they say even for the fancy surfaces, even some fantastic and a good brush, you can get most of what you need done. And you clean the surfaces of that oven. And the same with the racks to make sure. If there's a stain on the wall, you don't get nervous about stains. If it's flush with the metal, you don't feel like a crust or something like that, then it's and cleaning, a good cleaning on even the self-cleaning ovens is a good idea, because sometimes people who are overly cavalier about the capacities of the self-cleaning oven to self-clean end up with grease fires. Because if you really have allowed things to go crazy in there and you turn it on the self-clean, sometimes you can have a grease fire, which I will not relate tonight. However, any of you, as my dear friends, is entitled to tap me, and if I have not told you, please have me tell you the story of when our apple pie set itself on fire in our oven, and I called the fire department by accident. So I will titillate you with that, and you can ask me. In any case, so in a non-self-cleaning oven, once you have done these steps, you've cleaned it well, you've cleaned the racks, then it is sufficient, according to Rav Aaron Kotler and the whole world that has followed him. Interesting, this is one of the few cases where Rav Moshe Feinstein was more stringent. But generally speaking, the halachic community relies upon Rav Aaron Kotler, and that is that oven interior can be done with what is called libun kal, and libun kal, it is sufficient to turn it to like 550 or its highest setting, and that's fine, and that will kosher the oven and the racks and even certain other things which we'll throw in a bit later. What you cannot kosher in that oven, I don't know if Jessica's has this, if your oven has a warming drawer, you cannot kosher warming drawers for Pesach, sorry. If it has a broiler, a special broiler drawer, it depends. The conventional wisdom is you cannot kosher a broiler drawer. However, the reason for that is everyone who was writing about it, obviously not doing a lot of cooking, was assuming that the broiler drawer, you throw steaks and things directly on the broiler pan, and everything you've been done has been cooked on it. And for most people, I don't think most people these days use their broiler drawer if they have it. They will put things in an aluminum pan or in some kind of a thing, and they'll broil it on that, and then the whole thing comes out. If that is the case, then if you turn it on to broil for 40 minutes, then that is sufficient. And after the same kind of cleaning, then the broiler drawer can be accommodated, as long as I say, you didn't use it with the straight up stuff. Now,
40 minutes, you said? That's for the other two?
40 minutes. There are different versions. There are some of the sites that say an hour and a half, and some of the sites that say 40 minutes. Rabbi Heinemann seems to say 40 minutes is sufficient for these things. Now, let us turn back for just a moment to the self-cleaning oven. Self-cleaning oven, still you have to be careful, particularly around the doors, where the self-cleaning doesn't really self-clean. That needs to be carefully cleaned. Also, things on ovens that need to be watched, and this will be more with stoves, but you want to watch the hoods and things of that nature. And when you are cleaning your stoves, which we'll come to in a moment, you want to be very careful that you do not cover the vents. That is a way to do something very dangerous, because your oven usually, your oven has a ventilation place to sort of keep the heat circulating, and if you cover it, you can build up heat. People have destroyed their backsplashes because they subjected them to intense heat, and you don't want your backsplash splashing back, because it could be terrible. Okay. Well, hey guys. Anyway, so the self-cleaning oven, you have to be a little careful. Stovetops are particularly self-cleaning oven. Put it through the self-cleaning cycle. It will tell you. You don't have to put it through a 3-hour cycle. As long as it gets to the self-cleaning level, I think self-cleaning should be done in an hour or so. As long as it gets to its level, it gets extreme.
They log.
They log.
3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour cycle.
All right, so whatever is the cycle that your oven, 3 hours for the self-cleaning, okay? You heard it here. As long as, if that's the minimum, then okay, I stand corrected and humiliated. Okay, it's good. It's all right, I'm in therapy, it'll be all right. Let's get to stoves. Now, stoves come in a number of different iterations, right? So you have your standard gas stove with the nice heavy wrought iron grates. Okay, those grates, because the pots go right on them, should be carefully cleaned, and they should go into the oven with the same cycle. There's people who obviously were hoping for chumash. Those take care. Those are elements. Those elements go into the oven and go through. They can either go through the self-clean or through the libun kal, if that's all your oven can do. So the top pieces can be done that way. If it is an electric, now in terms of the underpans, people think I'm talking about lingerie. I'm not. Under that, those things need to be cleaned, but they do not really need to be koshered, because they never come in contact with the food. And if any food goes in there, you're not going to use it anyway. So that needs to be carefully cleaned out, the area, the interior there on the gas. And the same thing with the little thing where the gas shoots out, where the fire actually comes out. Clean it, but it doesn't need to be koshered, because it doesn't get food on it. What about the surrounding surface? Like the stove top, which is not actually on the fire. There, it depends on what, Sharon? On what material it's made out of. Very good. I'm glad you have not been wasting your time sitting here for 20 years. I don't know why, actually. Waiting to hear about, paper towels this year, aluminum, foil. Anyway, so for those, depending on what the surface is, if your surface is stainless steel, then understand what you are koshering is essentially from hot things spilling on it. So I forgot to mention, there is a subcategory in Hagala, purging, the thing where you put thing in boiling water, and that is called Irui Kli Rishon, pouring from a boiling pot. So that if the only way it ever got chametz was not have chametz boiled in it, but to have boiling chametz poured on it, then if you pour boiling water, also requiring the 24-hour fallow period, you pour boiling water on it, that koshers it if it's kosherable, namely stainless steel. However, and here's, the most joyless thing in the world is when the kashrus magazines start telling you, oh, and here's a secret tip or a great surprise. Those tips and surprises are just so anticlimactic. So one of the great surprises this year, don't say I never gave you nothing, was that when you're pouring from a kettle, you only get a thin stream. But if you heat the boiling water in a square roasting pan, then you can pour with a wider swathe, and it works. Obviously, none of these guys has ever koshered a kitchen in his life. Oh, that's a great idea. I'll just find a roasting pan and fill it with boiling water and start carrying it around my kitchen. It's suicide. Well, I noticed on the back of that particular journal was sponsored by a dermatologist who specializes in aftercare for burn victims. Anyway, so that is, don't say I never told you nothing. But you need to pour, and the hot water, it's not enough to pour it in one spot and have it sort of spread. You really have to try to pour it around. Now, it doesn't mean, however, you have to get the whole surface done at once. You can do smaller areas, which I would advise because you do want to collect the water sooner rather than later, particularly if you don't live on the ground floor. It's very nice to kosher your ovens, it's nice to kosher your stoves, but koshering your downstairs neighbor is something that's not going to make for a Zis and Pesach for anybody. So keep track of where the water is at any given point. Now, if you have, however, as many people do, a stovetop which is ceramic, which means like porcelain enamel, an enamel stovetop, that is not something which can be koshered with boiling water, and that should be covered. Can be covered with different kinds of things. A double covering of heavy-duty aluminum foil is what many recommend. And the nice thing about heavy-duty aluminum foil is you can replace it in the course of Pesach if it tears or something like that, but it will have a certain durability. All right? Now, what if you are an Oraitnik and you have a glass top range invented by an anti-Semite? Because no matter what, none of the usual things work on it. You pour boiling water and it's going to explode. If you cover it, it gets too hot and it gets finicky and it cracks. Why anyone would it's like, I've made an entire kitchen out of eggshells. It's very pretty, I can't cook there because the whole thing will crack into a million pieces. Why they invented this, but it's very lovely. It's a nice clean look. And they have the little thing there set into the glass, the burners. Oh yeah, it's very pretty. But for Pesach, and I hold like this: you do not buy this kind of a range unless you're sure you're going away for Pesach for the rest of your life, right? Put an endowment away to pay for the hotel for the rest of your life, and then buy yourself this range because you want to make sure you'll never have to kosher it. But if you did, so let's talk about what you would do. What you need to do is one of the few cases where you will actually leave an open chametz area. The burners themselves are not really a problem. You turn the burner to their hot heat and went to their highest heat, and the burners themselves become hot enough that they are koshered. The problem is all that surface. And not only is it a problem if anything falls onto it, the something is not good. The problem is also if you have a pot on that surface, like the pot extends out of the burner area and the pot spills over, then you've got hot liquid hot liquid stuff connecting your pot to a chametz surface. This is not good for the Jews. So what you need to do now I'm not suspecting any of you of having one of these glass top ranges because you're nice people. However, I'm telling you this in case you have a friend. You know the famous story about the Rizhiner, Rabbi Yisrael of Rizhin. A man once came to him with a terrible problem, which he came to ask the Rebbe on behalf of his friend. And the Rebbe gave him an answer, and he says, and tell your friend he's a fool. I said, fool? Why is my friend a fool? He said, because he could have come and asked me himself and said that he was asking for a friend. So, if anyone here has a friend with one of these, I'll just tell you briefly, the trick with these seems to be trivets, which means small things where you're not covering the glass, but small things that allow you to put the pot down if you need to. And if you have a pot that's going to be large, like if you're making, chicken soup for the army of Bangladesh, and your pot is larger than the cooking circle, you go to Williams-Sonoma right? And they have all these cute little pots, like the highly polished copper pots for $400 that I think, like old Gentile money gives each other for wedding presents, little tiny things, right? And then in the back, they have these giant soup cauldrons, and it's just a sign that says, for the Jews. Because we still like to actually feed people. We don't have we're Grosingers. See, Grosingers didn't die. It's simply, its spirit went and inhabited many, many Jewish homes, each of which is supplying food for the table. Just another main for the table. Right? So gluttony has diffused itself into Jewish life. Okay, so if you have a pot that is going to extend outside of the burners on one of those glass top things, what you want to do is there are these little metal rings that allow you to raise the pot. The key is you don't want your pot in direct contact with that area since you have not been able to cover it. Okay? I've been reading about this for years, and it's the first time I'm actually clear on it. That's why I'm showing off, even though none of you has it. But maybe we have some Alrightniks watching from home. You never can tell. This goes up on the internet. The Englewood, the Five Towns, the Hamptons. Who knows who's in that camera? There could be people who actually have these things, all of whom are now not talking to me anymore. Oh, am I grateful for modern technology. Okay. Now, so we've covered the three, yes, my dear.
I'm sorry, I have a question for a friend. Okay, so somebody told me that instead of putting your grates on top from your stove top into the oven because they can tarnish with the self-cleaning cycle, somebody told me that you can turn the fire on to its highest and put a block on top and have it like that for let's say 20 minutes or half an hour.
Well, there is a method that is one of the ways of Libun Kal. I frankly think you're going to get worse discoloration doing that because you're really raising the temperature by keeping the heat right on it. I mean, I've heard that. It's been mentioned. I don't...
But if you do that anyway, would you use do you have to have I'm sorry, this is the first time I'm making Pesach.
Don't be sorry.
Do you have to have a chametz Pesach blech? Do you have to have a separate... you have to have a Pesach like a blech then, which do you use to
do the burning?
Do you do the chametz one or the Pesach one?
The pair of pliers, I would turn it upside down and
Just
go
turn the grates upside down.
and it gets red hot and keep turning it and turning it.
Yeah.
Well, here's someone who's clearly not making Pesach for the first time. So so Annette has a way to...
Separate though, but years ago I
You
actually bought
invested in another set of... Well, I have to say, technologically, one of the loveliest things that we have with the internet and serial numbers, you can basically order replacement parts. So, for example, if you have the room to store it, if you have a ceramic or a porcelain enamel stovetop, we years ago, when we got a new oven, we treated ourselves to a whole new top. So the whole thing came off, and you cleaned out all the guck inside, which, by the way, is an important thing to do because things slip in there. Not everyone can. If you can't get there, you can't stick your hand in and eat it either. But if you can lift it, some of them have a removable top that can be completely replaced. Okay, I am digressing and thereby losing myself from my outline.
I have wonder pots from Israel, and I wouldn't use the oven because I use my wonder pots. Yeah. And the wonder pots is on top of
The sear pella, yes. So you use that instead of your oven?
Well, now I don't. Now I have a self-cleaning oven.
But in the olden days...
But it has it's like a metal left that has a hole in it. And you put the pot on top, the pot sits on that. And the pot has holes in the cover.
That's what she...
It's really wonderful. So I have one that looks like I want to place, I got a part.
So a lot of people in Israel, they used that because they didn't have ovens. Yeah, they baked in and everything. Okay, ladies, back to the outline because we will never get finished, and I might have to cut out some of the jokes, and I don't want to do that. So we have basically covered, I think we've moved through the oven and the stove. Someone is going to always ask me about the microwave. The part of the microwave, they say they have designed a test for a microwave. It will cost you a potato, however. The way to ascertain that the walls of your microwave do not actually get hot, which means that it can be koshered, is if you take a potato and you open it and you microwave it for a while, and then you feel above it. If you can hold your hand there for 15 seconds, then that's a sign that the walls of this microwave, the idea of microwave is that the food gets hot, but not anything around it. However, the exception to this is the glass in the microwave, which does get hot, and which everyone advises that you replace. Either get another glass, you can also get a piece of styrofoam and replace the glass turntable. And every year they ask me, well, can we cover it with wax paper? And I can never think of a good reason not to, except none of the book says that. So I know that if you replace it, you're safe, and wax paper seems to me to be reasonable because it is not water permeable, so that if something hot spills on it, it's not going to go through. Okay. So what you want to do with your microwave, again, the 24-hour fallow period, and then you want to boil water in it vigorously until the steam sort of fills up of the interior of the microwave. And this is a wonderful variation on the concept of kabolo kachpolto, that because if there was anything that hit the microwave walls, how did it hit it? It hit it because food steamed up, and it got the heat of steam. So you create a steam which removes it as well. Yes, Ruthie dear.
Why do you kosher the glass like you can kosher other glass?
Because glass can only be koshered when it has been used exclusively with cold. The koshering of glasses. So, for example, your Pyrex things cannot be koshered. A very good you mentioned. I was going to get to cold glasses later, but it's good you clarified it now. That is the reason, because heat is a factor. Now, let us move to now that we finished koshering the microwave, let us move to the sink. Right? The sink, again, Sharon, depends on the material. Sinks that are porcelain enamel, I always suggest a rather more elaborate scheme than you will find in most of the books, and that is that you do the best you can. What do I mean by that? There are some minority opinions which say that even cheres, even porcelain or pottery can be koshered. Minority opinion. How do they claim you could kosher it? You kosher it by a triple hagolah, 3 times purging. But that position is largely not accepted. However, we do mobilize it and in conjunction with other things. So what my Rebbe Shlita recommends is that the porcelain enamel, you do pour hot water over it 3 times after a 24-hour period with no heat. Pour the hot water over it 3 times. However, do not rely upon that to consider it a kosher sink. What you do then is you then cover it with some. Now, there are various ways to cover it. You can cover it with a simple sink insert, which many people use. You can cover it with contact paper, of which my mother, may she rest in peace, was a past mistress. She could cover a sink in contact paper so artfully that you would think that a decorator had suggested it instead of a rabbi. But you should do something which is basically water resistant. There is no such thing as truly waterproof. And the reason we go through all of these elaborations is that we want to make sure that in the event we have a backup. In other words, somewhere around the second Seder, this sink is just going, I can't take it anymore. Keep that simus away from me. The grease and the gunk. Stop it already. Stop it. And it just for a little while, it just goes bloop, 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 and that's it. Nothing's going anywhere. So all of a sudden you realize that you put dishes in the sink and they're floating around. You know, there's like, they're like doing the backstroke and on a pool of this disgusting water, which has, by the way, still is under your contact paper or your everything. So in effect, sooner or later the sink comes into play in that way, and what you want to do is keep the sink as kosher as possible. That's why you feel a little better that if you get one of these situations, at least you've koshered the sink as best as one can kosher it. I suggest if you are a truly Pesach-dik OCD, all the washing should be done in plastic tubs. It is a good time to buy Rubbermaid stock and just go crazy and let the Rubbermaid contain everything, because first of all, you will that way save your drain from needing serious work. But you will also, kashrus wise, you do all your washing in that, and be careful where you pour the water afterwards. Okay, so I mean, just in terms of good housekeeping, I would recommend that, because even the sink liners have like an underworld going on under them. So the first, it's so, I feel so sorry for like first time Pesach makers, when the first time they think they've saved the world with these liners, and then they lift it and realize what's been going on underneath, and they didn't understand like what was that smell. You know, they think a squirrel died in their potato bin, and it's just the couple days of Yontif in hibernation under the sink liner. Okay, so if you have stainless steel, however, simply pour it after a 24-hour fallow, pour it over, and stainless steel is kosherable. You must remember to change your sink drain pieces. You must remember to carefully pour water over the faucets and the handles, and in the event that you have elaborate water filters and things like that, those things should really be unscrewed and pour hot water there and clean them up and put them back and put them back. You sort of try to take apart things as much as you can. And of course, Sharon in about 15 seconds is going to remind me, Rabbi, tell them about. No, I told them about sink holders. You're supposed to tell me about cracks to make sure that if on the edges of the sink, for example, that really goes with counters. You're right. You didn't miss your cue yet. There are, where these things are installed. If there are cracks into which chametz can get, this is why God invented duct tape. Yeah, but that's if you're worried about what's in there. If you basically can't get to it and you just want to cover it, what you want to prevent is that if water comes in and floats things up, you don't want poison there. I'm not crazy about poison in the kitchen. I use that for other things. The seams, right? If the seams have opened a little bit, so if you put duct tape.
Can you use masking tape? Does it have to be duct tape?
Can you use what?
Waterproof.
Tape.
It's not as good against water. And masking tape tends to get room. And there's special tape you can buy in Muncie that a rabbi has certified, that is called Orthodox tape. It's very, I made that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. I just want to know, what I love is when they take notes on these jokes. It's like, yeah, I was going to write that down. It's like, are you listening? Are you listening? That was ridiculous. Are you listening? Yes, okay. Yeah, that would probably be all right also. As long as you can render chametz no longer problematic by, but interesting, some things that are not good, you have to take care. For example, I only realized this year that a certain kind of traps, like ant traps and things like that. The bait is actually chametz. So you have to be careful, put those things away. Yes? Of course. Do I look like the kind of person who wouldn't do counters? I don't do windows, but I do counters. Countertops. The counterinsurgents. We hold granite. There are many authorities. Granite can be koshered. Not only can granite be koshered, my Rabbi holds that formica can even be koshered. So if you have old-fashioned, not such yaha countertops, you didn't go to granite yet, that you pour hot water over it, but in those things you have to be careful to do the seams. As Sharon is muttering, there are those who do not believe that this whole process of pouring water all over everything, that it's not really worth it. They would just as soon
Gets in your
cover.
Gets in your drawers, your wooden drawers. Underneath them, it stinks. And wets everything.
You can line the very hot counter with plastic,
I,
and that'll save you drawers.
I'm really beyond the stage where I wet my drawers, but I think that I didn't start this, Sharon. Oh God, am I going to have to take that thing apart later?
About 3 years ago, Rabbi, you said all you have to do for the countertops is wash them down.
I never said that.
No.
It was Rabbi Willett who said it.
No.
And it wasn't.
You got one more choice.
He doesn't say that either.
No, but you can pour hot water over that. I only go by what I've learned. A little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. And you can cover it. You can cover it with anything that the old-fashioned ladies used to cover with boards. They were serious. They were serious. Boards. And then we once had plastic pieces made. All right, all of those work. Okay. So we have, Adasa, we have covered counters, right?
And what about with the little gaps around the edges? That do you have to use back tape or can you use masking tape?
Again, you want something that is resistant to water. So if you have waterproof masking tape,
But you can do it.
or you can, Sharon says if you were to pour bleach in those areas, so that means anything that might be stuck in there is going to be rendered inedible, so that might work also.
That's what you told us a few years ago.
That was me?
Yeah, and she doesn't know.
So I don't need to do that, I can just put
Okay.
Just on the
Only
cracks,
afterwards, and then pour it on the water. Right.
Just on the cracks.
Okay, are we good? Okay. Let's take a brief visit to the refrigerator. And we only go to the refrigerator because that is our chance to pay tribute to Hannah Meislish. And it's interesting, since I started giving these talks, the stuff that they say in the books has actually shifted a few times. I always said that because the refrigerator and the freezer are all cold, you should clean them out carefully. Freezers are true terrible chametz traps. The rubber washers all are tricky. All of those things need to be carefully cleaned, but in terms of actual koshering, conventional wisdom was not. However, there were always religious people who thought maybe you took a boiling pot roast and put it right directly in the refrigerator and it spilled and maybe it got on I don't know what they thought. In any case, well, you can't control how people keep house or don't. So there were those who cover the shelves with some kind of paper or cheesecloth. And they say be careful that if you cover with paper or something like that, you still have to make sure to put holes in it so that the air circulation is not. I do not. I stick by the guns that say you do not have to cover all the shelves. You certainly don't have to kosher them if you clean them well. However, here I always pause and remember one of the sweetest little ladies who ever lived, Hannah Meislish and her wonderful husband, Abe, Aleim HaShalom. And the first year I gave my talk, and I prepared like a crazy man that year because I was so young and new, and they came to everything. They were the first. I used to feel guilty if I would announce that there was some kind of a tzedakah or a poor person or something. The very first check was always from Hannah and Abe Meislish, and they were simple people, but the first tzedakah. And if you ask for volunteers, there are pictures of the two of them making calls for UJA. And Abe had a rather thick accent. I don't know what those people at the other end thought they were giving money to. I have no idea. But who could say no to him? The man was an angel. And I remember I said, you don't have to cover your shelves. And Abe leans over to Hannah and says, Hannah, you hear that? You hear that? And she says, no, thank you very much, Rabbi. It's a lovely shir. My mother covered the shelves. I'm covering my shelves. Don't talk to me, Abe. And anyway, in any case, so that's for the refrigerator and the freezer. And now for the spicy part of our program, the dishwasher, which every single thing you'll read will tell you you can't kosher the dishwasher, especially not if you have a porcelain enamel dishwasher. However, I have a Kabbalah from my Rabbi. Again, it is highly recommended that you get Pesach racks for the dishwasher. So on racks, we're pretty tough. However, if you clean the dishwasher out very well, make sure there's no actual guk there. This is a place where Rebbe, even for porcelain enamel, invoked the three Haggalah scheme, and if you put it through 3 hot washes, then you can use the dishwasher for Pesach with its special Pesach racks. If you're using a stainless steel dishwasher, you only have to put it through 1 hot cycle. This is also the point in the program where I always remind people, particularly those of you who live in private homes, this is the time of the year for Pesach, you should check your hot water thermostat. And for the purpose of koshering things like your dishwasher, turn it up and let it kosher, but then go down and make sure that you have turned it down to a temperature that cannot scald a person. Because lo aleinu, a lot of children and even adults, you turn the shower you have a guest who doesn't know the way your shower works, and they turn it on the hot water, or they turn off the wrong thing first. God forbid, it can be terrible consequences. So Pesach is a wonderful opportunity to make sure that your hot water situation is under control. Okay. As far as the surfaces upon which you are going to eat, tables, for example. Tabletops should be carefully cleaned, and they should also be covered with something that is water resistant, that is not water permeable. So the classics are, some people use clear plastic, some people use oilcloth tablecloths, which are very handy, and they're also good, they're easy to clean, they're easy to wipe off, and those should cover tabletops, particularly things like butcher block and wooden tables and things of that nature, so you can use your tables for Pesach. Because the kitchen is a food place, you want to really do a careful job cleaning the kitchen, as opposed to, there is a category of, in halacha makom she'ein machnisin bo chametz. There are places where if you ask yourself really honestly, do you ever take chametz there, real chametz, you probably would answer no. So in your prioritization of where you're going to go crazy, you want to deprioritize the areas which have almost no chametz traffic. That's spring cleaning. That's a very nice thing to do. But the real Pesach business is not to be centered there. However, places where little children roam, I wish that people would spend time on their cars instead of their linen closets, because they're very little chametz usually that gets into a linen closet. However, when it comes to a car, one wonders how little kids manage to get chametz into as many places as they do without actually sending it back to Detroit to be disassembled. because there are places that you could assume no one has actually ever visited except the guy on the assembly line who put the sucker together, that kids manage to get chametz into.
Not only the kids.
And occasional grown-ups. So cars really deserve our attention. A strange place where you would not think, if you still have, this is irrelevant if you're already of the cell phone generation, but if you have the old kitchen phone that actually is attached with a cord, the kind with the speaker, does anybody even remember what I'm talking about? This is before you were all born. When you undo the speaker, it is incredible how many times you would think that you just answered the phone, and instead of saying hello, you just want to and spit everything you were eating into the phone. Because little by little, they pick up a lot of junk. Other places that need to be checked, for example, baby carriages. Little girls loved both the carriages that you take the kids in, because they're like the cars, and even kids' toys. Kids are going to put anything in the place their doll would use it, like you would put the things in the place where they would use it. So there's all kinds of stashed treasure, in these kinds of secret places. Yes, Hadar.
What do you do about it? This is already another aspect. I don't know if you covered it before. I can't. What do you use to heat water on Shabbos? Or what?
Oh, I get this question every year, and every year I completely ignore what's in the books. Now, it depends. If you use it exclusively for hot water, and particularly if you don't use it at the table, generally it's in people's kitchen. I believe if you clean it carefully, and maybe the best thing to do is to pour some hot water like over the actual spigot, because maybe your hands were sticky or something of that nature. You kosher it that way. Jews kosher a lot of things that don't really need to be koshered because we're very careful. So my wife always jokes with me. She says, what we're going to do, we're going to have the lovely lady who helps us. She's going to take all the wine cups out of the china cabinet. She's going to polish them. We're going to send them to shul. We're going to kosher them. We're going to put them on the Seder table. We're going to put them from the Seder table back into the thing until next year. And then we're going to take them out and kosher them. This makes no sense. However, this, my dear friends, is Judaism. They have the virgin birth, we have Pesach. I believe because it is absurd. It's what Jews do. What are you going to do? Washing cups. What did I forget?
You forgot to mention the ice maker in the freezer.
Yeah, that's because I hate it. The ice maker in the freezer is a very treacherous being. Because remember, in the wild, before ice makers were domesticated, in the wild, their natural food was plastic bags. They would roam around in Antarctica, and they would just roam, and they would wait for plastic bags, and then they would take them in. So when they're in a freezer, if they get anywhere near a plastic bag, particularly if it has some frozen rolls, their natural instincts come back to life, and they start trying to suck all those bags into the ice maker. You don't have an ice maker.
No, like that.
Trust me. That's what people say when they buy baby lions. Mine is different. It's a pussy cat. It's just a striped cat. Yeah, right, until it eats the gardener. They're all like that. They're ferocious. So you have to be really careful because the freezer is a giant chametz den. And so you have to clean them very, very, very carefully. However, any ice that's made with regular water, so for example, you could even go into a gas station and buy a bag of ice on Pesach and you don't have to worry about it. Let me just finish up. What did you just ask me, Hadassah? The hot water thing. The hot water thing, I would pour hot water on the handle and clean it very carefully.
And a kettle that's just used for hot water?
Kettle, I don't know, for some reason, because kettle's on the stove with all the other stuff, it's much more.
So
You use a Pesach kettle.
In the oven when you're koshering.
If you want to do that, if it will withstand the oven, but usually they have plastic handles. I don't think I would do that. I don't think I would do it. Pesach, what's Pesach without the Pesach kettle? Our Pesach kettle always was more elaborate than our regular kettle. All the year we had a kettle. until it boiled out, you didn't know it was really serious. You know, it was quiet. Oh, it just pushed out steam. The Pesach kettle, we got one of those annoying whistling kettles. And it never whistles anything good. Did you ever hear a kettle do the Marseillaise or anything like that? No, it's just as if you have boiling water on your stove. Stop everything else you're doing. Because clearly that's the most important event in your little life. So they were always annoying, but they had a character. You know what I'm saying? We were so glad when Pesach was over. We didn't care about bread, but we couldn't wait to get away from that noisy kettle. Such a headache it was. Anyway, so where were we? I'm coming back to ice, but I'm just apropos of people kosher things, which, because it's a custom to people kosher their washing cups. You know, your metal washing cup that you use on Shabbos, people kosher them. People kosher candlesticks. Do me one favor. Lee Furman, if you're watching this, one year we accidentally tried to kosher in boiling water some candlesticks that had wax on them. Boy, was that a night. It did not work out well. We learned some valuable lessons. So make sure if you're going to kosher your candlesticks, because there are those who kosher anything that is on a table. It's on the table with chametz, you kosher it. Right?
If the washing cup isn't stainless steel.
If the washing cup isn't, I wouldn't get crazy about it. Yeah, you could change. All right, I wouldn't go crazy about that. Okay. However, in terms of the ice, clean it very carefully. Just make sure it's clean, because it's all cold, but you have to really clean it very, very carefully. And then, since it's just water coming in, you could use ice. You could use the ice maker on Pesach. Many people, because they're a little nervous, many people have special ice trays for Pesach, and they use the ice. They go back to the old-fashioned way of making ice. Okay, I'd like to go to a few koshering of implements. If I could, we just barrel through those. Most implements are koshered with hagola, with boiling water. And a little family advertisement. A week from tomorrow, my son Shmuel will be doing his annual koshering. He is available you can make appointments with the shul office between 8:30 and 5:30, when you'll have your own time slot, and you can get your things koshered. And in addition, from about 7:30 to 10, there will be koshering open to the community. It's a wonderful time for Jewish fellowship. There is often a line, and you could be there for a good couple hours waiting. And also, there is on Saturday evening, there is a special, Sunday evening, there is a 1-hour express for Kiddush cups only. Because that is to allow 24 hours to elapse. If you were a family, for example, you have one precious becher that you used for Shabbos and was on the table and you want to kosher it. So you give 24 hours after Havdalah, and then we kosher it during 1 hour on the night of B'dikas Chametz. So there's a lot to do. You have to do your B'dika and then bring over your becher if you want to kosher it, unless you want to try to kosher it at home. Now Hagola, this purging koshering, basically works on metal, unless the metal was used with dry heat, which means like a cookie sheet. Right? Anything used with dry heat must be koshered with libun. Has to go through the real fire. Has to go into the oven. What can be koshered here? So if you have a pot, for example, that you used for noodles, right? It's always used with a water medium or a soup pot. Now the problem with some of these pots is that they have joints and they have various things that those joints would have to be hit with an actual flame, which we can do. So for example, if you have an all-metal soup pot with metal handles, what Shmuel will do is, before putting the entire pot in an immersion, he will hold it over a flame until it gets red hot in the joints, and then he will immerse it in the hot water, and it'll be fine. Where you get trouble is if you have plastic handles.
Or if the metal is not adequately capable.
If it is,
I watched one of my pots.
Right, a pot that is not top quality could take a big hit. Generally speaking, it's a good idea. Wherever you can, it is a good idea to have Pesach-dik things, with one exception, and that is for silver bechers and things of great beauty, that you want to use your most beautiful things on Pesach. And so, for example, I mean, I don't think she does it quite at the same level anymore, but Mrs. Messenger, Tzulanga yarn, every year Mrs. Messenger would bring in the most beautiful silver, perfectly polished. And much of it, I suspect, it had not been used since the previous Pesach. And carefully kosher it. And you realized that what you were seeing there was an expression of a tradition of the perfect blend of refinement and piety that had developed over hundreds and hundreds of years. And anyone who was privileged, I don't know how many of you have been in the neighborhood, any of you who was privileged to know Mrs. Messenger, Tzulanga Yarn's mother, may she rest in peace, Mrs. Bear, then you understand how long it took for this fine silk to be woven. So those things were koshered. When I see people, you see sometimes a beleaguered husband, and he's coming to kosher a measuring cup, and and there's little spoons you use when you bake, these Woolworths items. Sometimes it means that people don't have a great deal. They don't have money for extra things for another set, and sometimes it just means that someone doesn't really know where to start, and they just take everything. So someone could write a brilliant sociology essay on just watching things at the koshering night. But those are basic. Those are some basic guidelines. One of the things that's hard to kosher is knives. Knives, especially with handles made of another material, don't even bother, because we're not going to be too interested. I usually try to be in my study for a good portion of the koshering, especially at night, so that people can come in and sell chametz, etc. But in addition, my son Shmuel has been doing it enough years. He has a pretty good feel for what should and what shouldn't be koshered. Okay, let's just move in a couple other directions. Some of this year's headlines. I am delighted to say the quinoa wars are over. The OU, thank God, God bless them, has finally weighed in. It has made the decision. Quinoa is not chametz. Even more interesting, the guys they sent to Bolivia, apparently there were a few more chevra like quinoa that grow in these countries. So in future years, I believe we'll be seeing more products. Quinoa is intensely nutritious. It's a wonderful food. And it's such a great addition to Pesach that if the Kitmia stormtroopers had taken it, it would have been a tragedy for Jewish cuisine and health. So the quinoa wars have been settled. Nevertheless, you must have quinoa with a reliable hashgacha, and they're in the OU, I think the OU magazine lists the ones which are appropriate, and Gesundheit, just enjoy the heck out of them. I'm also delighted to say that this year, for the first time that I remember, it used to be this thing that all seltzer needed hashgacha because there was this business that they were using carbon dioxide, which was a byproduct from beer production, blah, 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 blah. Everybody seems to have forgotten about that, because I guess in actuality, none of them are doing that. So, nowadays, all unflavored seltzer and all unflavored waters do not require hashgacha. They're all okay, and okay for Pesach. Isn't that nice?
And you can buy it on Pesach.
And you can buy it on Pesach, because they were definitely not manufactured that day, right? Also, still on the good list, although all cartons and juices require Pesach certification, what does not, and here is a relic, canned frozen orange juice, as long as it is unsweetened, with concentrate with no additives, orange juice and white grapefruit juice are both acceptable for Pesach without a hashgacha. You can just buy the frozen, unsweetened, simple stuff. Also, raw nuts, but only if they have not been treated with anything. No BHT, PhD, LDQ, or limited partnerships.
What is a raw nut when it's in its shell?
It means when it has not been roasted. If it's raw, it has never been. It's not.
It's out of the shell.
It can be walking around the block. It can be doing all. It can be. It cannot be, as I recall, it can be shelled. The ground, not ground nuts. Anything short of ground, it can be pieces, can be chopped, but and that goes for walnuts and pine nuts and one other one that I seem to recall, and probably almonds make sense, but be very careful. It cannot be roasted or dry roasted or anything.
The roasted are not healthy at all.
They're especially not healthy because they're chametz. No, but okay. So the raw ones are better, not as tasty, but some of those can be used. If you have any doubt, please ask, because I have my sources carefully marked up so I can actually retrieve them. Well, in the shell you can, but that's...
That was fun. We used to play with it when we were kids.
So did Rabbi Akiva.
That was like marbles.
Yes, Ruthie dear.
Milk, if you buy it before Pesach.
Milk, the issue with milk can be purchased before Pesach. If you can get it with Ashkoch, it's good. If you cannot, you can get regular milk. And very important, if any of you have lactose intolerant people, you cannot use the lactate pills. However, you can buy lactate milk before Pesach, but you shouldn't buy it on Pesach. Also very interesting, the lists are coming out now. If you have, for example, very young children or elderly people who need products like rice milk, almond milk, those kinds of things, we have lists of the with Ashkacha, but there are lists available now. I have all the lists of the brands that are not actually, which have been served, don't have any real chametz in them. They're not advised. Most of them are kitnios. They're not advisable for regular Ashkenazic adults, also called RAAs, regular Ashkenazic adults. But it is important to know about these things, particularly for children and for older people. A whole big bunch, for example, of the Ensure products have been noted not to have any real chametz. That if you're dealing with someone who's in frail health, there are people who that's basically all they're taking, would be disastrous. So, and the same thing at the other end of the life spectrum, infant formulas, Enfamil, Similac, all those good things, contain kitnios, which means for babies they can be used, but you should just make sure to wash out, have new bottles and rinse them out in the bathroom. Pet food is very serious business because pets are not allowed to be fed chametz either. They're neither allowed to be fed chametz, and people don't know, during the year they're not allowed to be fed basar b'cholov, meat and milk together. However, pets can eat kitnios. So you look at the ingredients, and it was obviously made before Pesach. If you don't see grains, and you don't see a mixture of meat and milk, then it can be rice, it can be other forms of kitnios. Those can be used for your pets. For large parrots, for example, large parrots can do very nicely on pure alfalfa pelts. Alfalfa's good, pellets. Alfalfa's good, millet is good, sorghum is good. None of these are problematic in terms of bird foods. I particularly love designing Pesach diets for pets. It's a subspecialty. I'm not quite ready to make it my main form of livelihood, but I'm happy to function as a consultant.
What do you do with your snakes?
Well, first of all, I no longer have snakes. Second of all, when I had snakes, they ate mice. And mice are all kosher Pesach.
What do you do with your medicines which you have to take?
You take them. First of all, any pill, for example, any pill which is prescribed by a doctor for a condition that is not eating, you don't even have to ask. The only cases you have to ask for are things which are chewables and liquids. There you may have some issues, and we can tell you which ones are better and which ones are worse. Yes, my dear.
So,
1 second, yeah.
Okay, so I didn't understand the view. Do you have more milk with one Pesach?
No. We have plenty of milk, which is if you need to buy milk which is not kosher Pesach specifically, you may buy that milk before Pesach. But if you have access, as we do, we have Stop and Shop and all these places have plenty of kosher Pesach. Plenty of kosher Pesach dairy products. I'm sorry, dear? Skim Plus. Honestly, I wish I knew what that meant. Is it with vitamin additions? We can check it in the various journals. Yes, Sandy, I'm sorry.
So you said very quickly that the lactate pills were not kosher.
They're not. Sorry. They seem to have real. Well, but you can mix. You can do the milk beforehand. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. I think this might be like women being crazy on Pesach, but I bought a Kosher Pesach Brita on Sunday, and Joey's like, just you put water in there. And why? I said, I don't know, it was not unstable. I said we should have a new one for Pesach. Is that something that we need?
I would say that in this case, your sensibilities most closely resemble tradition.
Okay.
I would say that if you called me on Pesach and you were in spasm because you suddenly realized that your Brita was not, I would say, plus you wash it with chametz. I think we're going to do Marvin time. Don't get nervous on it. Toothpaste.
Because you used to be able to buy like Crest or Colgate or something.
Well, some of them there are some of the brands which has been certified not to have chametz in them. People, for some reason, are careful to find out what brands to buy, even though me'ikar adin, toothpaste, and even things like toothpaste should not be a problem because they're not edible. You don't eat them. You put them in your mouth, but you don't swallow them, you spit them out. However, I would be happy to look up and find out which national brands. Usually, as I recall, last couple of years, Crest has been a problem.
It is.
Crest is a
One
problem.
should really get it kosher Pesach.
If
But
you
not
can,
the tartar, it's very specific, not the tartar control, not the...
all right, the lists revel in these categories, and we'll get you some names. Sharon will even look it up for
Non-food
you.
items like paper plates, detergents.
Okay, the only things you have to worry about,
If they're open during the year, you've opened it.
I think you're still okay. Paper plates, you want to be careful with the cheap paper plates because they're starch. You also want to be careful with paper towel rolls. The first 2 sheets and the last sheet are affixed with starch. You know how you have to sort of pull them? So if you start a new roll of paper towel, it doesn't mean that you can't use them for anything. You can use them, wipe up the bathroom. You shouldn't use them around food. That's the cousin.
Stuff that you've opened during the year.
I don't think opening it per se is a problem, because they're poisonous. Yeah. You don't need a new Tide for Pesach. My dear friends, I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to wish you all a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, and your question, the famous question. Bella's question.
I'm leaving Sunday, not Erev. When do I do the Badika?
Oh, very good question. If you are leaving your domicile for Pesach and you want to do Badika, it is preferable, number one, are you going to be gone the whole Pesach?
No,
Oh, okay, fine. Then you do the Badika the night before you leave,
Saturday night.
but you don't make a bracha, and you collect your little chametz and you take it where you're going and you burn it there, and say Kol Chamira there. Okay? Thanks everyone. Chag Kosher Sameach.